Lesson 2.4, Writing Equations of Lines. So recall that you can write an equation given the slope and the y-intercept. So slope-intercept form would be y equals mx plus b. And we know that the b is the y-intercept and the m is the slope. So if you are given 2 plus y equals 3/4 x, we're going to first put it into the correct form by subtracting 2 from both sides. Y equals 3/4 x minus 2. Then we're going to plot the y-intercept, and the sign in front of the number goes with it. So we're going to put a point at -2, and then we have rise over run. So from the -2, we're going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll connect our points. We have end arrows to indicate that it will extend in infinity to both directions, and label it y equals 3/4 x minus 2. Another form is point slope. So if you're given the slope and 1 point, you simply sub in those values, and the values we would sub in I left in red. And this is actually based off the slope formula. So we would have m equals, and I'm going to leave off the sub 2, my normal sub 2, so that it matches up nicely with our point slope. So we're going to transform this by multiplying both sides by x minus x sub 1, multiply this side, so cancel, cancel, and then x minus x sub 1, and then I'm just going to switch it so that it matches our point slope. So we would put y minus y sub 1 equals our slope, x minus x sub 1, and that is where the point slope formula actually comes from. Okay, so we're given a slope of 4 and an ordered pair -1, -6. So we have x and y. So we'll sub in -6, our slope of 4, and then we have a -1. So then we have add the opposite. Y plus 6 equals distribute 4x, add the opposite, distribute plus 4. Now, if we want to convert to slope-intercept, we just need to isolate y. So I will subtract 6 from both sides. Y equals 4x minus 2. And from here, you could graph it using your y-intercept of -2 and your slope of 4. Let's say you're given 2 ordered pairs, and we want to put it into point slope form. What would we do? Well, we need the slope. So we have slope equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And we'll determine our slope. So we have our group 1, our group 2, slope equals, and we're going to put in our values. Okay, so we have 6 minus 2 is 4. Add the opposite, -1 plus a +2, so our slope is 4. So now I have my slope, and I'm going to choose one of my ordered pairs. I will choose this one, and we'll put it into point slope form, and then we'll put it into slope-intercept from there. Okay, so y minus the 6, and whoops, we need to put in our slope. We said our slope was 4, and then x minus -1, which is really a positive 1. And then we'll distribute. So we end up with y minus 6 equals 4x plus 4. Add 6 to both sides now to convert it into slope-intercept. So y equals 4x plus 10. So here is slope-intercept. And here we have our point slope. Finally, you may be asked to write equations of two lines that would be parallel or perpendicular. And we're going to start off with parallel. So given negative 2, 3, write an equation that passes through negative 2, 3 and is parallel to y equals negative 4x plus 1. And you must remember that parallel lines have the same slope. So we're just going to start subbing in our values. So we have x and y. So y minus 3. We're going to borrow this slope because they have the same slope. So negative 4, x minus, and a negative 2. And we're going to say add the opposite. So we end up with y minus 3 equals negative 4x minus 8. If I add 3 to both sides, y equals negative 4x minus 5. And now we will graph both equations so that you can see that they are parallel. So for the red line, I started off at 1 and my slope was negative 4, 1, so I went down 4, but then I went in the positive direction, right 1, and graphed it. For the green line, I started at the y-intercept negative 5, but instead of going down because I didn't have enough room, I could say the 4 is positive and the 1, the denominator, is negative. So I went up 4, but I went left 1. We have one more example. All right, so now we're going to graph expecting perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines mean that the slope is going to be opposite reciprocals of one another. So we're going to borrow the negative 4. It's negative 4 over 1. The opposite would be positive, and then the reciprocal is going to be 1/4. So my slope is 1/4. My y value is 3, and my x value is negative 2. And now we'll solve. Okay, so we subbed in the values, and we used our distributive property. And I wanted to point out that we ended up with 2/4, but it's AKA, also known as 1/2, because we can reduce it. And we'll add 3 to both sides. And instead of 3, we could call it 6 over 2. That's the same as 3. So y equals 1/4 x plus 7/2. And that's what we're going to graph. So when we graphed, we started at 3.5. And then my slope said to go up 1 over 4, or I could do a double negative and go down 1 to the left 4. A double negative is the same as a positive. And remember, perpendicular means we end up with a right angle. So we had to use a slope that was the opposite reciprocal when we started out our problem.